is your body's fight or flight response kicking in. So this is the part of your brain that's designed to protect you from danger. So like if a predator was coming at you, you would have this response. So basically your body releases this surge of adrenaline and noradrenaline, and that produces symptoms like racing heart and shortness of breath and hot flashes or chills, tingling sensations that kind of get to a peak really quickly, which makes sense because you'd want to have a really quick response if a predator were coming at you, and then kind of slowly decrease over time. And all these symptoms are really designed to help you survive that situation. So either by fighting the predator or by escaping the situation. People are really on alert for that predator or that danger that's causing the panic attack. So they might be really aware of their environment and kind of scanning for any possible sign of danger. People often also have an urge to escape the situation, even though there's not necessarily a physical danger present. So for example, if someone has a panic attack in an elevator, they might be overcome by the sense of, I have to get out of the elevator. Also, people often have fears that they're losing their mind or going crazy in the midst of a panic attack because they're having this really strong physical response and there's no clear cause for it. And what happens with some individuals is that they start to become really, really fearful of the panic sensations themselves because their brain is looking for this danger, and this response is occurring in the absence of any actual threat. So the physical symptoms themselves get labeled as that threat. When some people have a panic attack, they don't kind of make much of it and they just kind of go on with their lives and it never happens again. And that's actually more common than I thought when I first learned this. So about 28% of people, I believe, have had a panic attack in their lifetime, and something like 11% of people have had a panic attack within the past year. Whereas only, I think about 2% of people have had panic disorder in the past year. It's 5% in their lifetime develop panic disorder. So a lot more people have a panic attack than go on to develop panic disorder. And it seems like what happens with the folks that develop panic disorder is they get really anxious about the prospect of having another panic attack. Sometimes they're anxious because they do correctly label it as a panic attack, and they fear that they'll have a panic attack in public and that it'll be really embarrassing, or they think that they will lose their mind if they continue having panic attacks, like lose touch with reality in some way. Sometimes people also don't really understand what's happening to them, which makes sense because it's kind of this like sudden rush of weird physical symptoms. And oftentimes they'll mislabel that as something medical, like a heart attack, or some other kind of like undiagnosed medical problem. So understandably, some people get very, very anxious about any sign, anything that they really associate with having a panic attack. So that could be those first physical sensations that they start to notice, like if their heart rate picks up a little bit, they get really anxious about that. Or, you know, if they start to feel lightheaded, for example. And sometimes they start to get anxious also about certain places where they've had panic attacks in the past. So, you know, if they had a panic attack on the subway, they might start to feel really anxious riding the subway. And then oftentimes when people feel anxious about those things, they start to avoid places where they've had panic attacks or places where they think it would be really bad to have a panic attack. They also might try to avoid activities that bring on those physical sensations that are associated with panic. So it's really common for people who have panic disorder to avoid things like caffeine or exercise because those tend to produce similar symptoms. And the combination of avoiding those things and worrying a lot about the prospect of having a panic attack can lead to that worry can lead to kind of this cycle where someone notices kind of those first physical sensations that might be associated with a panic attack. They get really anxious, you know, having thoughts like, what if I have a panic attack here? That would be so bad. Or maybe, oh my God, there's something wrong with my heart. I'm going to die. And then when they start to have those kinds of anxious thoughts, that tends to increase the physical sensations. And then that tends to increase the anxious thoughts, and that tends to increase the physical sensations until it really spirals into a panic attack, or until the person does something to escape the situation, which helps a lot in the short term to reduce their anxiety, right? So if you're feeling really, really anxious about the prospect of having a panic attack and then you leave the situation and the symptoms go away, it feels better in the short term and you're more likely to do that the next time. But that avoidance prevents people from learning that actually they can get through a panic attack. It's not going to last forever. It's not dangerous. It's just a natural response, even though it's an unpleasant sensation. And so that process of avoidance really perpetuates the problem, and people tend to, as they start avoiding, have more and more panic attacks, and also it tends to start interfering with life more and more. I think of CBT as panic for panic disorder as having kind of 4 different components. The first component is psychoeducation, so just giving people more information about what's happening in a panic attack, like what function those symptoms are serving, and dispelling some of those those myths about panic attacks, and that it doesn't mean you're going crazy. It doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck like that forever, and so on, can be really, really powerful for panic disorder. So just giving the patient more information about what's happening during a panic attack in their body, how this kind of cycle perpetuates, and dispelling some of those myths about panic attacks. The second piece of treatment is cognitive restructuring. So this is really helping the patient figure out what are some of the things that they're telling themselves when they notice panic sensations, or when they worry about having a panic attack, and helping them to really look at the evidence for and against those things, and think about ways of coping with worst case scenarios, so that they're treating those anxious thoughts, which can become kind of automatic, so that they're becoming more aware of them and learning to kind of challenge them rather than just accepting them. The third piece of treatment is interoceptive exposure. And this is a really, really kind of unique to panic treatment. So this is exposure to body sensations. So it involves doing lots of exercises with the patient, like running in place, or intentionally hyperventilating, breathing through a straw, spinning, those kinds of things. And the goal of that portion of treatment is to bring on those physical sensations that remind the patient of a panic attack that they fear, and help them kind of get used to those sensations and sit with them until their anxiety declines. And also it gives them an opportunity to see that those symptoms really aren't dangerous in and of themselves. And then the last piece of panic treatment, really this is more for folks who have panic disorder and agoraphobia, which is a good portion of patients. And this is in vivo exposure, or situational exposure. So this basically involves having the patient intentionally put themselves in some of the situations or physical places where they tend to have panic attacks, and stay in those situations for a prolonged period of time. And same idea as the interoceptive exposure. The goal is really to stay there long enough to let anxiety have a chance to come down, and also to help them get some corrective information about what actually happens when they stay in these situations for an extended period of time, as opposed to escaping.